only like less than 3 years ago.
Yeah, and I the first thing that came to mind when I read this was I'm picturing this old lady like, what did you just say? Like beating him with a purse or something. And that's like, I don't know why that's the first image that comes to my mind. Like,
it's from Louisiana, so you can just
I can see that southern old lady like.
Oh,
I'm sure I'd be interested to talk to somebody from the South and wonder what like the old down south like culture is about profanity, because I've met a lot, and like we have oil, we have oil and gas guys that come up here, and we've had friends that are in that field, and they're not really I know they're not really bad mouth, like especially it depends, it really does depend, but the ones that we were around, they weren't really as bad as I guess I would expect, but because they're the type that were kind of like rough around the edges, you would almost expect it from, but they were very respectful, and so I don't know if that's a normal thing in the down south culture, but
oh yeah, I've met a few that very respectful people, but I've also known some of them, like met them outside, and then you go onto the site with them, or the well pad or anything like that, and you listen to them talk to the rest of the guys. It's shocking, but not overly surprising. I mean, they're just like, it's like night and day, but they know how to be respectful when they need to be.
I see. So. And maybe it's just a time and place type thing, and maybe that's what it's all about, because it was in front of a woman. So maybe that was that could have been why it was such a disrespectful thing. So
oh yeah.
But most of the other arrests found for cussing involved someone cussing at a cop, and that kind of stuff's just asking for it. Because if you look it up on YouTube, you'll see all kinds of videos of cops just getting pushed over the edge and arresting people for cussing at them. But.
Yeah, and that's even though they're a cop, it doesn't matter. They're still being disrespectful to a person. That's still the intent. That's being malicious. That's using profanity, and it's wrong to do that. At street level and popular culture, Americans are freer with profanity now than ever before, which is like what we were talking about. People use it so much. Like the boys in the house that I have. I mean, some of them like they're getting better, but I mean they come in there. I mean it's just every other word they're saying something, and I mean, and you get on. I watch YouTube videos and different things where people just, they're dropping words constantly because it's just people are comfortable with it.
Are there any rules like that in the group home?
Yeah, we have rules against it. It's just we can technically I guess you could do restrictions and take stuff away from them, but I mean when you're looking at the things that they could do compared to the things that they are doing, it's kind of like it's not really worth the hassle. I mean, if they go off on somebody or they're disrespectful to staff or something like that, and they just go on a tirade at them, then that would be a situation. But most of the time, I mean, it's like, hey,
it's
you need to
your
watch
battles.
your language. Yeah, it's like kids, man. You got to pick your battles. I mean, that's what I try to do. I have gray hair from picking battles. Let me see what we got written here. I got them all off here. Oh, so like it really doesn't matter. Like it. So it may seem that people judge people on what words they use because people throw around the F-bomb or say a certain S word. Instead of like stuff, they say we use that word, and it's just really. I'm just gonna be honest, guys. I'm not good at following some of this, like reading and trying to talk at the same time. Something I'm gonna have to work on. But I mean, at first glance, it really comes down to like we've been talking. Like it comes down to what's being said and what it's being looked at. And over the years, like words have changed. Like if you look back, just from my grandparents, like in the 50s and 60s, growing up, some of the words they used. Nowadays, we look at as what are you talking about? Like, oh, gee willikers, like that's an alternative to cussing. But you say that in front of people today, I'm guaranteeing there's people that listen to this that's going to cringe when I said that. But it just depends, and it just.
Now, it's kind of funny as there's some of the words that our older ancestors would call taboo would seem bizarre and strange to us, but for example, on the alternative word side of things, like were there any words that your family or whoever saw as bad even though they weren't? Like when my wife and I first started dating, one of the first times I was over at her house, I can't remember what I said something sucks, and I never saw that as a bad word, but her mom just her mom thought it was, she was like, oh my gosh, watch your mouth, don't say that. And then there was something else too, so there was so I guess every household's different upon what words you see as bad, but so yeah, that at the time that word seemed taboo or strange to me, but the real question about all of this is their words may have been different throughout culture or throughout our history, but how different from them are we? Because like we've been discussing, it's all about our intent. Now on the cultural history side, since we're looking back, as I was saying a little bit earlier, swearing in the English language it dates back to the 15th century, demonstrated often in Shakespeare's plays. And the oaths of the Tudor and the Stuart centuries, the era of Shakespeare, if I butcher any of this, forgive me, they still jump out at modern readers from plays, courtroom testimonies, and countless other sources. And they strike us as very different from our own bad language. Swearing, which is a solemn promise or profane, was a religious issue. It was an oath called on God to guarantee the truth of a statement, just as profane swearing took God's name in vain. Swearing supposedly ran along the lines of social status and gender, which we were saying, which still applies in some places, like how in the South it's not appropriate to use it around women. And swearing is always something as of somewhat of a performance. If you wanted to be believed by your neighbors, swearing in solemn oath with one hand on the Bible was the best option. And our legal system was built on that promise to tell the truth, so help me God. And which I kind of find in our culture that's pushed away and split away from God as much as they have, that we still to this day use that in our courtrooms, which I mean it's a good thing, but it's just, I wonder how many people take that oath, but it doesn't mean anything to them, because it only means as much as
it means as much as a person.
Yeah.
And that's where the swearing, that's the taking the Lord's name in vain. That's more of where people, that's what the first commandment is doing. Not so much saying God's name in vain as it's saying, but you make a swear, like you were talking. And that
You're
really...
like, I promise this is true, and God would testify that it's true. But then...
Swear to God. Yeah.
And then if what you're saying is a lie, then I would consider that blaspheming against God's name. Which I think is where this all kind of began.
And we were... something I'm going to throw in here real quick. We were talking about the English language, as far as swearing dates back, that's recorded, because a lot of times it wasn't recorded, but I just read...
Yeah, I was going to say there's probably always been something.
I read a few weeks ago, there was an article about, they found some Babylonian texts, like on tablets and cruciform and all that. There was the first ever recorded Your Mama joke.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Which to some people would be considered profane. I mean,
yeah.
Especially that lady there in Louisiana, she probably would think a Your Mama joke was terrible. So...
oh man!
But but to us, we think it's funny because our culture
turned it into something funny. Yeah,
yeah. We grew up, but back in the day, if you said something about somebody's mother, that was insulting.
Oh yeah.
The worst. I mean, that was profanity. That was terrible. So that was another I guess, cultural reference.
And I think our culture turned it into Yo Mama into something funny. There was even a TV show, I believe, on MTV for a while, and but it was all nobody saw it as offensive because nobody really meant what they were saying. It was all just people turned it into a joke. But if I believe if someone were to say if someone's mother was actually standing there and they said it with an actual intent, then I feel like people would take that offensively at that point. So it's all, as we're just going to, we're basically repeating ourselves. It's all about your intent. Now we're going to transition here into the, on the biblical perspective of profanity, because we might have some opinions, but the Bible has a lot to say about how we use language and
the men of the Bible weren't perfect either, and there's ways of that. And there's many examples of people cursing each other. Maybe not the same words we would use today, but the intention was the same. Peter being one of those. The Bible doesn't specifically condemn specific words or types of words that are not to be spoken as profanity. The Bible does make a clear distinction on the importance of using wisdom about the words that we do speak. There's multiple verses which we're going to get into that's going to talk about the intention in the words. So
now we've all seen the verses of Peter where it says Peter was swearing, but there was one funny. Well, I shouldn't say funny. But there's one that I think it was in 2 Kings, and it was about this man that was going to declare victory over their enemies, and he told the queen that she was going to die, and he was just like, we're going to throw your darn body off this, and like you should just read it. The men of the Bible, they weren't perfect, and they had a lot of words to use like we do. And our first scripture there that talks about this comes from Proverbs chapter 18, verses 20 through 21. It says, "Wise words satisfy like a good meal. The right words bring satisfaction. The tongue can bring life or death. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences." Now a lot of us have heard the tongue has the power of life and death, and this is where it kind of originates. And Proverbs was written by the wisest man to ever live, Solomon. And one night, God came to Solomon in a dream, and he said, "Ask me for whatever you want, and I'll give it to you." And Solomon asked for wisdom, and God's reply is found in 1 Kings chapter 3. It's pretty neat. It says, "So God replied, because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice, and you have not asked for a long life or wealth or death to your enemies, I will give you what you have asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one else has ever had or ever will have. And I will also give you what you did not ask for, riches and fame. No other king in all the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life." And there's a later story about how this all came true when another queen comes to meet Solomon and see his kingdom, and she passes out after walking into the palace because of how majestic everything was, his riches and his people and how happy they were. And but anyway, all of this came true, and we see a glimpse of his wisdom in the book of Proverbs, which provides us with a guide of moral living. So if you're not sure where to begin with, if you weren't raised in a church background that had all kinds of rules of how we should live, you should read the book of Proverbs. It's not really a bunch of rules. It's more of a suggestions and wise ways to live your life. But it provides us with a guide of moral living in which those who believe and do not believe have lived by for many years. As well as he was given a kingdom with so many riches that, as I said before, a queen had come and she had fainted when she saw his kingdom. Now the point is that we can trust Solomon's wisdom and his words to say that the tongue has the power of life and death. Now, James talks a little bit about this as well in the New Testament.
Yeah, it's James